This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
What's going on, everybody? Back at it for another week on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Welcome to the program. What a weekend. We talked a lot about how awesome it was going to be with the Banjo Bowl, big weekend of CFL football and week one of NFL, and everything delivered. We're going to break down the Bombers' beatdown of the Riders and the latest in the Canadian Football League with Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun. And then chop it up with Brad Gagnon, national reporter for Bleacher Report on week one of the National Football League, and tee up tonight's Monday Nighter between the Baltimore Ravens and the Las Vegas Raiders at Allegiant Stadium in Sin City. Big shout out to all of our sponsors, including Manitoba Battery, Not Autocorp, Royal Sports, Little Brown Jug, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Boston Pizza, Canadian Club Whiskey, Assiniboia Downs, and Coolbet Canada. Speaking of Coolbet Canada, had Chris Abbott in for the weekend, came in for the Banjo Bowl, took him around the city. Obviously, he had a great time. You want to talk about a great weekend to come to Winnipeg. Banjo Bowl weekend is it. And of course, myself, Remis, Dustin Nielsen, and Chris want to thank everybody that popped by on Friday night. Had tons of fun banging out that lock shop, and great to see some of the WST regulars. I know Dallas was by, Jet Oil Tom, Big Les, the Gitch. It was a great crew. But let's get to it. Let's get Michael Remis in here and let's fire it up. Lots of football to get to, not to mention the Red Hot Blue Jays, incredible finals at the U.S. Open. The CTO has arrived. Remo, what an awesome weekend, huh? How are you?
Yeah, that was a great weekend. Banjo Bowl did not disappoint, and we had the tennis as well. CFL all weekend. I had another great showing on our DraftKings contest, so I'm in a good mood. We had NFL all day yesterday. Did you know Matt Stafford had an arm? It's amazing what a guy can do with with an intelligent coaching staff. So, and what was it? I don't want to get into big disappointments when I see some people shouting out Derek McGorn in chat. Says I love seeing sad Aaron Rodgers. So lots to get to. Great weekend, lots going on. Thank you so much. And yeah, it was great seeing everyone on Friday. I see Les, Tom said in chat, Dallas, Gitch. Nice of those guys. Jet Oil Tom. Nice of those guys.
Definitely. And you know what, a big thanks to Crystal, Leda, the folks at BP took great care of us. And man, it was a fun show. And I will say, give myself the WST Barry Horowitz. 6-0 in the lock shop on Tuesday.
No.
Yeah, had both. You had the over 40.5 in the Bomber Rider game and BC -7. So the first ever perfect slate from the lock shop. And of course, I'm going for a perfect NFL weekend tonight, needing the Raiders +4. But we'll get into all the NFL stuff later on. Brad Gagnon's going to join us from Bleacher Report, and there's so much to get to. But yes, Derek, great to see you, buddy. Kabilis is here, Shark Mifley, Ryan Friesen, Big Dan Milborn. Awesome seeing everybody here. Leslie's there, Manny Fran, and the Gitch man himself, who, was an incredible addition to the festivities on Friday night. But listen, Reem, let's start off. Banjo Bowl, your thoughts. 2 games against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, 0 touchdowns allowed. We really thought that game in Regina was, a vintage Bomber defensive performance. Well, I'll tell you what, Riders did a pretty good job of moving the football, especially on the ground early on in the first half. But it was a war of attrition, and the Bombers continued to get better throughout the game. Knocked Cody Fajardo out of the game. And at that point, the Bomber offense got it going, and they ran away with it. 33-9, 2 consecutive games where the Riders held under 10 points and without a touchdown. We kind of joked about Willie Jefferson wearing the swag shirt last week, the Swaggerville. But to be honest with you, that defense sort of dragged a team that was a little bit morbid offensively to the Grey Cup. This is an offense that doesn't need to be carried, but the way the Bomber defense is playing right now, you'd have to think that the focus is purely on winning the West Division now, continuing their hold on first place, and winning a game and heading to Hamilton in December for trying to run it back.
Yeah, if you're a Bomber fan, you're going to be really excited about the beatdown of Saskatchewan. They haven't scored a touchdown against the Bombers in the 3 games. Bombers, aside from that Argos game, their average points is, especially for CFL, extremely low. And it seems like each week it's a different guy doing it on defense. You've had Willie Jefferson with the star game, Jackson Jeffcoat. It was Brandon Alexander, who was player of the week last week. And this time it was Adam Bighill, who had, 6 tackles, interception, sack. He's everywhere. And this defense is so elite. And as far as offense, I know Collaros hasn't thrown a 300-yard game, but he doesn't need to. And he's doing what he has to, and he can throw the ball deep. It's not like the offense previously where they struggled to move the ball. He's hitting Dembski, Deep, Lawler, Bailey. These guys are getting it done. And Andrew Harris is back on the ground as well. And, they get to the 1-yard line. It's automatic touchdown. Sean McGuire. He scored more touchdowns, in the last 3 games, or yesterday, than the Riders have in the last 3 games against the Bombers. It's crazy, this Sean McGuire. Guy's a weapon back there from the 1.
Think about this. 2 games over 7 or 8 days, however long it was. The Riders scored 0 touchdowns, and Sean McGuire scored 5.
Yeah.
You want to talk about killing some DraftKings lineups, though. For everyone that's playing DFS with Andrew Harris, or, even Dembski and Lawler and Adams, for the most part, obviously Lawler and Adams got in. But the fact that that McGuire was, he's automatic right now, and it's sort of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's a little bit reminiscent of Chris Streveler. I'm not going to really compare McGuire and Streveler because we haven't seen the dynamic running anything beyond. But the bottom line is, when you need a yard or two, the combination of McGuire behind that big offensive line that continues to lead the way, there's not a lot of suspense. The guys are getting ready to move the chains or get ready to bring the convert team out.
Yeah, how about Zach Collaros saying they should have thrown hats on the ice, on the field. He's like, I thought this was Canada. Where's that for the 3rd touchdown? But thankfully, I didn't play Andrew Harris in fantasy, but if I did, I would be livid with the Bombers. What does this guy got to do to get a carry from the 1-yard line? I know it's not Mike O'Shea's job to cater to fantasy players, but I know we got some guys. I see Mitch in chat. He's like, those McGuire touchdowns are killing me. And you can't fault the team for scoring and winning games, but fantasy players getting shut out for taking the big skill guys. But it seemed like I was watching at the lake, flipping back and forth between the Bomber game and the tennis. It seemed like a massive party, sold out crowd at IG Field. That was absolutely celebrating the entire game. So it looked like an incredible atmosphere, and you hope with some more home games that they can keep this up going, because people know what a great time it is at IG Field when the Bombers are playing.
Oh, it was so great. I got to give a special thanks to Trevor Knott and the gang over at Knott Auto Corp. Chris from Coolbet and myself were guests of Trev, and ended up doing a little tailgating beforehand outside. And yeah, the atmosphere of that day, it was a gorgeous, perfect September afternoon for football. Everyone was in a great mood. And I honestly think that, the checking your Vax card or whatever, coming in, people go in there. It's the most normal I've felt at any point since the beginning of the pandemic. And people were having a great time, and the home team stepped up and delivered what everyone was hoping to see. And that was a thorough Blue Bomber victory. But I will tell you, the smiles on people's faces, the atmosphere around there before the game, after the game, during the game was, listen, that's what it's all about. That's the best game of the year. I think we all know that. And this year we've had 2 really special ones. The opening game against Hamilton, The first time back as part of a large crowd, getting Bomber fans back, and of course raising the Grey Cup was one of those days where I think everyone will remember if you were at it. But I have to tell you, the Banjo Bowl continues to get better and better every year. And, I think partly because of the climate of everything that's happened, there wasn't quite as many Rider fans as we would often see in the past. And I don't think that's because they were discouraged about the Labor Day game or anything like that. There's probably a lot to it. But I'll tell you what, the stadium, not going to look better than that very often. And when the home team keeps playing the way they are, Remis, and sending people home happy, you hope that turns into many more return visits for fans for future Blue Bomber games this season. But it's going to be tough to top that performance, both on the field and in the stands for the 2021 Banjo Bowl.
Yeah, and they're going to be going off to Edmonton this weekend, a late Saturday game, my favorite time slot on the CFL schedule. And I was glued to that BC Ottawa game as someone who stacked Mike Riley. But they got a couple coming up against Edmonton. I'm looking forward to seeing how they do, because Edmonton's offense, starting to move a little. We thought Calgary was going to be back with Bo, last week there, but they seem to be in trouble. Did I forget who?
They salvaged their season with that win.
Yeah, they definitely did. Sorry. I'm misremembering. Edmonton did win, 32-20. And Calgary's at 2-4. Edmonton's 2-3. So a bit of a jumble here in the. I'm looking at the week before. Sorry, Calgary won 32-16.
32-16.
Sorry, I was looking at 2 weeks ago.
That was the middle game. That one, that was sort of a game that was lost by a lot of people, because if you were at the Bomber game, finished up afterwards, doing whatever you were doing, get out somewhere. We were in the parking lot for a long time and ended up going to a local establishment that was quite busy. And at that point, by the time you sort of turned around and looked at the television, BC was playing Ottawa. So the Battle of Alberta did get missed by
I did miss that.
But quite obviously you did. And you probably didn't pay much attention because you didn't have any guys in your DraftKings lineup. You're just waiting for 9:00 when Mike Riley was playing against Ottawa.
I had James Wilder and Josh Huff. I didn't have Kamar Jordan, who I know had an elite game for Calgary. So Calgary was back my yesterday or on Saturday. My bad.
Couple of other things from the game. We'll talk stamps and everything else that happened in the league with Ted Wyman. First of all, a big melee after that touchdown. Yes. I took a picture of it. It was actually quite hilarious. I was in that corner in that end, and you look over and everyone's going at it, and just every single available flag from the referees was thrown. I think I took a picture and there were 6 different flags on the ground. But it showed you just how frustrated I think the Riders were of what the Bombers were doing to them. And that idiot 92, I can't remember his name, but just for whatever reason, decided that he'd take a punch at Sean Maguire, who was really not doing a damn thing other than walking back after celebrating the touchdown. I do think, though, Remis, if you saw the replay, Andrew Harris may have caught a break there because if 2 guys are getting kicked out on the Saskatchewan side, you easily could have had 33 leaving, considering the way he grabbed that guy's face mask and ran it around. But things got pretty heated there.
Yeah, I think you want to see that rivalry. And, the fans get up for the Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, but you see the players get. I know Willie Jefferson trash talking the last 2 weeks. They got heated, and Andrew Harris, ripping a guy's helmet off. They said he didn't throw any punches, Huss. So you ripping a helmet off by the face mask? Is that's allowed? I was
fine with it. It's a 15-yard penalty. It's a 15-yard penalty.
But if you throw a punch, you get tossed. So I guess the refs got it right. Definitely fortunate for Winnipeg, although I know Augustine and Oliveira have filled in well in the past. But you can't. Andrew Harris is tough to replace. We talked about Dembski, who missed a couple of games. He's really, been a weapon. And,
he's so good. He is so good. And we really saw just how dynamic Nick Dembski was. What were the numbers that he had? I think he finished with 134 yards on 5 catches. And it wasn't all from Zach Collaros. Of course, they put Maguire in on that 2nd and 1, and everyone just assumed that he was going to be rushing like he does every other time he's in the game. Ended up pulling back, finding an open Nick Dembski. And, if it wasn't for a touchdown saving tackle, that was going to the house. I think it ended up being a 50-yarder. But yeah, Dembski was such a huge part of the Bomber attack. And you know what? Andrew Harris got it done as well. I mean, 18, what is he at? 80 yards on 18 carries, a couple big ones for first downs, especially in the second half. And, you know, it just seemed like the Bombers really exerting their will, especially in the second half. I mean, the defense was pretty much doing it all game long. But the minute Isaac Harker came in and the Bombers seemed to have control, that pretty much was over. And it gave fans the opportunity to do the wave in the fourth quarter at IG Field.
What do you think?
Know what? Well,
are you okay with the wave?
I said this. You know, I'm not really a wave guy. And I hate the wave when it's done at an inappropriate time. You know, sometimes you'll get Jet games where it's just a completely lit crowd. It's a Friday night, but it's like a 4-3 game. And there's 15 minutes left in the game and it starts happening. That's a no-go. But honestly, I said, maybe it's a little early, but considering the way the game's going and just the atmosphere, if there was ever a time to get the wave going, it was Saturday afternoon. So, while I didn't really get hyped for it or participate much, I did sort of have a smile on my face seeing it happen and continued for a while. One of the great waves we've had in Winnipeg in a long time, and that's what the Banjo Bowl is all about, I guess.
Never thought you'd be so pumped to see the wave back, Hustler. You know, one thing we got to get to, a lot of people were talking about this as well from the game, and I'm sure you and Ted will get into it shortly, but I'm seeing it in chat, and we can't forget a couple of kicking issues. Now, we haven't even, it's funny, we haven't even talked about kicking at all the last 5 years. Like, Medlock out there, but Mark Leggio, he missed 2 extra points and another 48-yarder. You can't be missing extra points. They brought in the American. He's out of quarantine. He's going to be, trying out this week. I think they go to him. But, I mean, that's a rough go, Huss, with the 2 extra points missed.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, and I know the game itself wasn't that close, and you look back, and it didn't mean much. Tell that to somebody that had over 43. because, and again, I was on it at 40.5, but we did see it go up, and I mean, the difference between that being a cover was the misses by Mark Leggio. So I'm sure that's not a major concern of the coaching staff, what it did to the total and over bettors from the Winnipeg fans. But I will tell you, in close games, which the Bombers are going to expect to be playing at some point going forward, you need to have confidence in the kicking game. And unfortunately, that was the one sore spot yesterday. Mark Leggio's performance. So we'll see what Ted Wyman has to say about that. Ted's going to come on in just a second. Before we do that, we will do a full recap of everything that happened in the NFL with Brad Gagnon in about half an hour from now. We'll get to the Coolbet Lines. CFL lines are out. We'll talk about Monday Night Football as well. A little bit later on the show, and final week of live racing at Assiniboia Downs. So we'll get to our Monday picks for that all before we are done. Before we bring Ted Wyman on, just want to shout out our new sponsor, Manitoba Battery Distributors, over at 1026 Logan. Check them out online at manitobabattery.com. These are the guys that have batteries for everything at the best prices in town, and they deliver citywide for less than it would cost you to get the same product at one of the big box stores. They'll take care of automotive, industrial, farm, power sports, quad cetos. They have it all. Right now, obviously, the focus getting into the winter is more on automotive batteries, but they do have a great September promo. A $20 maintainer for your battery. This is perfect for your summer car, your boat, a camper. You put this sucker on throughout the winter. It intermittently charges it when it needs. So come spring, you're turning the key and you are good to go without worrying about what happened during our cold Winnipeg weather. You can give them a call, 783-8787. Pop down and see them at 1026 Logan or find them online at manitobabattery.com. I mentioned the gang at Knott. Man, Trevor, great hospitality, a great time at the Banjo Bowl, and they've been busy. Big car show on the weekend. I know they're involved with what's going on out by Assiniboia Downs, and they have just launched the Winnipeg Car Lab, which is decaling, wraps, rims, all sorts of cool things. If you're looking to maybe spice up your vehicle, find them out. They've got a contest on right now to win a Tesla for a weekend. Check them out on all the social media channels at Winnipeg Car Lab. And, well, tell you what, we're done with the Banjo Bowl, but Bomber gear is still going hot right now. Jet season just around the corner. And, of course, all the NFL action one-stop shop for all of your licensed merchandise, and that, of course, is Royal Sports. While you're there, check out all the great stuff on the King Skate, Snow, and Surf side, the massive hockey department with the season right around the corner, and still time to check out their bikes, camping gear, and more. Over at Royal Sports, longtime sponsors of Winnipeg Sports Talk, greatly appreciate them. 750 Pembina Highway. All right, let's get to it. A Banjo Bowl beatdown by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and no one we enjoy having on the show more to chop it up with than Ted Wyman of the Winnipeg Sun. What's up, Ted? How are you?
Doing absolutely great, Huss. Always great to be here, and yeah, that's a pretty interesting game to talk about, considering the way things have changed in the CFL in the last couple of weeks with the way the Bombers are playing.
Tell you what, I think a lot of people after the loss in Toronto were willing to say, hey, this is still a pretty good football team, but they are really going to be tested. Calgary didn't have their starting quarterback, so people expected a win, and it was a very close game. But the real litmus test was going to be this home and home with Saskatchewan, who was undefeated coming in. I mean, after 2 resounding wins, Ted, without allowing a touchdown or giving up double-digit points. I'm trying to think historically where this defense sits in. I mean, we certainly can compare it, I think, to the Swag Boys back in 2011 that sort of dragged a pretty moribund offense all the way to the Grey Cup. But if you're a Bomber fan right now, you're looking at the way the defense is playing and knowing what this offense is capable of, and it's pretty hard not to be legitimately excited about the potential of maybe doing it what they did in 2019 again in 2021.
Well, and realistically, Huss, it's like they've just carried it right over. It's incredible when you consider how much time passed between that 2019 playoff and Grey Cup to August of 2021 when they started playing again after sitting out an entire season. And they really have picked up where they left off. That defense is just as ferocious as it was, just as effective, you know, in a way that I don't know if anyone really could have expected that a defense could be quite that effective in keeping points down. But as you pointed out, the offense of this team is also extremely efficient, and that all goes to Zach Collaros. It's almost like Zach Collaros was just that one missing piece. I think we already knew that in terms of the Bombers winning the Grey Cup in 2019, but it really does change. You know, his presence with this team changes its overall greatness, because already pretty good players there in that offense, but it just wasn't clicking all the time. And a defense that came together halfway through 2019 and has not looked back one bit since.
Well, and you know, just focusing on the defense for a bit, you know, we knew that the guys up front were legit, some of the best in the league. Willie Jefferson, Jeff Coate. We knew the linebacking core led by Adam Bighill would be there, but there were huge questions about the defensive secondary. And Ted, now with 4 games so far holding their opponents to under 10. I mean, I think even the most optimistic Bomber fan, or maybe even member of the organization, I don't think could have imagined just how well the new players would fit into this group and perform the way they have at this point in the season.
Well, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from those defensive backs because they have played well. Mike Jones has been really good. Brandon Alexander at safety, really good. Dietrich Nichols is looking kind of like an all-star to me. I haven't had a problem with what DeAndre Alfred has done at a very difficult position on the corner. And, you know, but the truth is, when you've got a defensive line like that is doing what it's doing, the kind of pressure that they're putting on opposition quarterbacks is just making it so hard for those guys to throw the ball. And the way that Richie Hall has things designed with they're dressing 9 defensive linemen each game. They dressed 7 linebackers last game. They're moving guys around. They've got different looks all the time. Adam Bighill's on one play, he's rushing the passer. The next play, he's playing safety. They've got everybody confused. And I think that is certainly an advantage to these defensive backs because they're just not facing, you know, those great one-on-one opportunities very often for the opposing quarterbacks. They've done a great job when they've had the opportunity. But really, I don't know if I've seen a defensive line be this difficult to contend with in a long time. It's not just Willie Jefferson's incredible ability to rush the passer and Jackson Jeffcoats, but just the different looks they're giving them all the time has the other teams confused.
You know, you mentioned Richie Hall, and I have to laugh. I had a conversation on the weekend talking about the defense and the way that they're playing. And, you know, I was reminded of not too long ago, I mean, we'd be back on the old station and we'd be talking about the Bombers and we'd go to the text line and let's just say Richie Hall's approval rating was not maybe where some of the other members of the organization was. And he was somewhat of a, he took a lot of heat at times. How much credit does Richie Hall deserve for the overall performance of the Bomber defense?
Well, I think a ton. And I think it's because he's been patient with it. He stuck with it and he knew what he wanted out of this defense. And then finally, they found the right mix, and it wasn't that easy to do. Even in 2019, that the defense was having some serious struggles for a lot of the time in 2019. But when they brought in Mercy Maston and Nick Taylor, the veteran defensive backs, and then added and moved Brendan Alexander to safety, that made a huge difference. And it just made what Richie was working on click. The communication became so much better. The defensive line just did its thing. And the linebacking core, came through when it needed to, if anybody got through that line. And those defensive backs with the communication were just so much better. So I give it a lot of credit. I saw someone on Twitter tweet out just a question, Adam Bighill for MODP, which is most outstanding defensive player. And in my mind, I thought, how about Richie Hall for MODC? Most outstanding defensive coordinator, because really he has had a great start to this year.
He certainly has been. Offensively, what a performance by Nick Dembski. I mean, you know that he's a playmaker when he is healthy, and man, he was impactful really throughout the game, and not just from Zach Caleros. Caught that 50-yarder from Sean McGuire on the one time he wasn't running for 1 yard and then spiking the ball in the end zone.
And getting people all fired up and fighting and stuff. But yeah, I think you talk about Nick Dembski, and he's just gotten better and better throughout his career. More impactful. He was fantastic in the playoffs for the Bombers last year, running the football and catching the football. He is so fast. I think people maybe just don't realize how great of an athlete Nick Dembski is. He's a Canadian. He's a guy from Winnipeg. He's not one of these big American college trained players. He's a former Bison, Oak Park Raider, but this guy is a fantastic athlete, and he showed it to you in that game against the Riders on Saturday. Just his blazing speed, just catching a pass over the middle on a crossing pattern, and it turns into 49 yards. And then they throw him out there as the one player, right? Everyone else is on the line protecting for what's supposed to be short yardage. Sean McGuire drops back, and then it's one-on-one between Nick Dembski and I think it was Blaze Brown, the defensive back for the Riders. And really, Dembski was kicking himself for not scoring a touchdown there. He was sure he should have been able to beat that one guy. So he's not taking it as his greatest game because he feels like he could have done more.
Got to give some props to the boys up front. We focused on a lot of the big plays, and sometimes the offensive line gets a little bit overlooked, but between protecting the quarterback, establishing the run, and really exerting their will on the Saskatchewan defense. There's a lot of it starts right there with Jamarcus Hardrick, Stanley Bryant, and the guys up on that O-line.
Well, and don't forget that Saskatchewan defensive line came into the Labor Day Classic with 14 or 15 sacks already in 3 games. I mean, it was, they've been destroying the defense that they've been playing against to this point in this season, and they really got nowhere against that Blue Bombers offensive line. It goes the same way. Willie Jefferson said before the Labor Day Classic that the Riders hadn't faced any heat in terms of what the Bombers were going to bring from the defensive line, and I felt like it worked both ways. The Riders' defensive line had not faced an offensive line of the caliber of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and that was another place where Winnipeg dominated. They haven't been as dominant against the run this year as they have in previous years. That's one slight knock on them. I don't know whether that is just basically the way teams are playing them, trying to make sure they shut down that run and force Winnipeg into passing situations. But Winnipeg doesn't seem to mind that too much because they seem to have a pretty good quarterback now. And as long as you're not letting Zach Caleros get hit, that takes away the one biggest concern about him for people across the CFL, and that's that he's going to get hurt and Winnipeg's going to be left in a tough situation without a top quarterback. But the way they've protected him this year has been very good. Yeah, he's taken some hits and he's going to continue to, but they've done a really good job of limiting those.
Ted, the one thing that maybe wasn't up to snuff is the kicking game. It was a tough day for Mark Leggio. It didn't matter, obviously, in a game that was decided by such a wide margin, but that must be concerning for Mike O'Shea and Bomber management. How do you see this playing out over the course of the week with the new kicker in camp?
Well, the Bombers are lucky that they haven't needed it to matter. I mean, and let's be honest, they did need it to matter in one game against Calgary, and they won the game because Leggio made the kick, and Rene Paredes of the Calgary Stampeders did not. So let's give the kid some credit. He came through with one big game, but there's tremendous inconsistency there, and it's not just the fact that he's missing these attempts, converts, and field goals. It's how he's missing them. I mean, we're talking 10, 15 yards wide. They're all wide right, by the way. 10, 15 yards wide and short. 48-yard kick in the CFL, you got to make that. It's got to be far enough at least. You can't be coming up short on those. And that's 2 weeks in a row where he did come up short on kicks like that. He said he's a great guy. He's great to talk to. He's working his butt off, and Mike O'Shea respects that. But he said he was getting under balls. And, I'm sorry, but it's just not good enough. This is professional football. This is the top level you can be at in Canada, and it has to be better than what it's been. And I think that means Ali Mortada, who was signed, he's an American. He's 31 years old. He's bounced around a lot. I don't think he's played any high-level pro, but a lot of indoor football and things like that. I think he's going to be kicking in practice this week, and I think there'll be a pretty good chance that he handles the place-kicking duties on Saturday. I imagine Mike O'Shea is loath to do that. I think he'd like to give Leggio one more chance. But at some point, you can't take that risk.
Well, I'm with you on that, Ted. And you look at the matchup coming up. They'll be playing an ornery Edmonton Elks team that just lost the back end of their home and home with Calgary on home turf. And they've been putting up points this year. And you would have to think, although they didn't put up a ton on the weekend, that at some point the Bombers aren't going to be winning all these games going away. And you are going to need a key kick. And the funny thing about the Calgary game was that, it was a 35-yarder that he missed, but got the mulligan because of the time count violation. And then, to his credit, blasted that 45-yarder right down the middle. But certainly, it's sort of funny, though, that as the one thing that people are really concerned about, and it's legitimate, it's Canadian football, 3 downs. Special teams and kicking is very important. But to your point, the way that they have played on offense and defense has sort of made that a moot point. But I think it's unrealistic to expect that to continue for the rest of the regular season, and especially once you get to the playoffs.
Well, at some point, it's going to come back to bite you. Everyone knows that. And if you're Mike O'Shea, you know it too, and you can't let it happen. There's no guarantee whatsoever that this new kicker is going to be better. We don't know that. He's going to get a chance, I believe. I'm not in Mike O'Shea's head. I don't know what his plan will be for this situation this week, but I can't see why it wouldn't be worth a try. As you pointed out, they gave up 5 points they should have had in that game. It was 12-9 at the half. Winnipeg should have been up 17-9. That's a big difference, especially when you consider how good Winnipeg's defense is. They're not giving up touchdowns. Well, if you're up 17-9, you're in a pretty good position to already win that game. So, I don't think you can afford to lose those points. The Bombers are obviously used to the automaticness of Justin Medlock. It was funny. I just, for fun, was watching as we came into the Banjo Bowl and the Labor Day Classic. I was watching last year's West Final, the amazing crossbar game there in Regina. And you watch Justin Medlock kick, and it's effortless. 4 times all over the field, no matter what distance, effortless, just perfect. Everybody got spoiled by that. But it's got to be better than what it is. Nobody's expecting Mark Leggio to be Justin Medlock. But you got to be consistently decent, or else you just can't be a part of that in this league.
What do we know what Medlock's doing right now? Is he just? I know he hasn't officially retired. Is he spending some time away? Like, is there any possibility that at some point we see Medlock back in a Bomber jersey at some point?
Yeah, I don't think so. I've texted with him a few times. He's moved his family from Florida to California, and that was a big focus of his situation. He wanted to be concentrating on that. Would not real interested in coming to Canada when it came to the whole situation with COVID and all that kind of stuff. I think he just kind of is laying low. But I also know the Bombers have been contacting with him numerous times since the beginning of training camp and through the early games of the season. and he has not expressed an interest in returning. So, another name that is on a lot of people's radar is Lirim Haralahu, who once played for the Bombers and is an excellent kicker in the CFL and has been bouncing around the NFL, was recently released by the Dallas Cowboys. I do not believe that he's got another gig right now, but I'm told it's not something the Bombers are pursuing. So, a guy like that, either one of those guys costs a lot of money too, Huss. And I mean, when you're paying Willie Jefferson and Zach Caleros and Adam Bighill and Jackson Jeffcoat and Andrew Harris and Darvin Adams, and you name it, you're not flushed with cash against the salary cap to bring in a big name kicker right now.
Ted Wyman of the Winnipeg Sun with us, recapping the Bombers' win over the Riders in the Banjo Bowl and looking ahead to the rest of the CFL season. And Ted, when you look at the standings, I mean, these two wins, the Bombers have an absolute stranglehold right now on first place. 2 more wins than any other team in the division, or the entire league for that matter, but also now owning the tiebreaker over the Saskatchewan Roughriders. You go into a place like Edmonton, if they can win the next few of these divisional games, Mike O'Shea, I think, is going to be in a very advantageous position of really being in complete control of this division. The goal for them, get a bye, 1 home game in front of the fans at IGF to go to Hamilton in December.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are going to look at it in that big picture way, but Mike O'Shea and anybody who plays for Mike O'Shea is not ever going to look at it in that big picture way. They are going to talk about going 1-0 each week. They're going to talk about getting better each week and keeping their foot on the gas pedal, because I think the one thing that would concern Mike would be for his team to get complacent in any way or to start thinking that they're good. They're the defending Grey Cup champions. Yeah, they're beating people up right now around the CFL. Yeah, they got a defense that doesn't give up points, touchdowns, doesn't give up points in the second half, 3 points in the entire fourth quarter. These are numbers that absolutely jump off the page at media guys like you and I and fans, I'm sure. But Mike O'Shea will want to reel that in continually and keep this team as humble as possible and just focused on the goal of winning each game and just building towards what they want, which is obviously another trip to the playoffs and another crack at the Grey Cup. Now, that would be a heck of a lot easier if they continue playing the way that they have and they get first place and they get to host a game in December in Winnipeg. That sounds cold. But it would be, I think we can all see a path to that pretty easily, especially since I don't think Edmonton or BC, who the Bombers play their next 5 games are against Edmonton and or BC. I don't think that those teams match up to Winnipeg right now. They do have some real good players. Trevor Harris and Mike Riley come to mind especially, but I don't know that they can match up. Now, I'm not saying the Bombers are going to win all those games, but even if they win 3 of the 5, they're going to be in great shape to take first place. It could be a runaway.
Just speaking of the West and the games on the weekend, I'll admit, I was still at the stadium out after the game, did not see much of the Calgary-Edmonton game, but talked a lot about it both here and in Calgary on the weekend. And this was a game that, the Stamps are essentially playing to keep their season alive. And I know that's crazy to think after 6 weeks it could be done, but, they lose that game. They're 1-5. They've lost a tiebreaker against Edmonton. I already know where they're at in the standings. Bo Levi coming back, a big performance. They've still got a long way to go at 2-4, but it's a very different story for the Calgary Stampeders in the mix of where the West is with that win on the weekend than had they lost to go to 1-5.
Well, all you need to know about how important it was to the Stampeders is the fact that Dave Dickinson chose to bring Bo Levi Mitchell back into that game. The guy had a fracture in his leg. He only missed 3 games. The fact is, Jake Mayer played great at quarterback for them as well, but the urgency was obvious to any observer as to what the Calgary Stampeders felt they needed, and that was certainly to win that season series or be in that season series against the Edmonton Elks, and they did that. They came back and they did it, and I think just bringing Bo Levi back, more than just being a really good quarterback, maybe the best quarterback in the league, and maybe the best player in the league in a lot of people's minds, is that he's such a leader, he's such an important part of it, and it sends a message to the rest of that team that they know it's important to win these games right now. It's hard to imagine teams talking the way that they are when you're only in week 6 of the CFL season, but you cannot discount how important each game is, especially against the West Division in this shortened season. It's there's eight games left for the Blue Bombers. If you were in a regular year and there was 8 games left, you'd be calling it the stretch run already, and that's exactly where they are.
No doubt about that. East is pretty tight. I mean, Toronto with that 1-point win, thanks to the goalpost, they are at 3-2. Montreal is at 2-2. Hamilton 2-3, and then there's the Ottawa Redblacks at 1-4. We joked that it was a good thing they won that first game in the most bizarre fashion possible because the wins might be few and far in between. But holy smokes, has it been ugly the last month for Paul Appelese.
Yeah, and I do feel bad for Lapo. Obviously, he was in Winnipeg for a long time. A guy that served the Winnipeg Blue Bombers extremely well. Fantastic job as the offensive coordinator, particularly last year when the Bombers won the Grey Cup. But it's a tough situation there in Ottawa. They were hurt by a lot of factors, not the least of which were players retiring or choosing not to play this season because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has left them thin. And they're obviously not in a great spot at quarterback. I think they have to be encouraged by the way Dominique Davis played this last game against the BC Lions. He's still prone to big mistakes, and that cost them as well, but he did throw for over 300 yards. He can run. He's got a good arm. I've never had a ton of faith in Dom, I must say. When he was in Winnipeg, I watched him lots, and I know they loved him. I know Lapo loved him. I know Mike O'Shea loved him as a teammate, as a player, but his performances were not anything too special. Certainly nothing to write home about. So I think they're in a lot of trouble. It's going to be hard for them to win any more games, to be honest. I'm not trying to just write them off completely, but with what's been going on the last couple of weeks, they got to play Montreal 3 more times. And if you don't think Vernon Adams is going to keep lighting them up, you're not paying attention. And then you're going to deal with what Hamilton's bringing. Toronto is able to beat Hamilton. Ottawa's not in that league. And, it's really, the Bombers don't get to play Ottawa this year, which is another, pretty much a win that you could have chalked up. And so that's kind of a, unfortunate thing for Winnipeg. I don't think it's going to hurt them too much, but it is going to skew the standings a little bit, I think, because, as I said, Montreal plays them 4 times. Whatever record they end up with, I think you're going to be looking at it saying, there's got to be an asterisk almost to that, in terms of how good they really are, because they've played so many games against that team that just isn't competitive.
Well, I'll say one thing, though. I mean, it really does affect the West teams in that, in all likelihood, if Ottawa doesn't win any games, Montreal, Hamilton, and Toronto, it'll be tough for the 4th place team in the West to jump over one of those, which then makes these divisional games that much more important playing within the Western Division. Ted, interesting story today on The Wire coming out of the weekend. Chris Jones is coming back to the Canadian Football League. He resigned as the head coach of a high school team back in Pittsburgh, where he's from, and he's on his way to the Argos. And from what I'm seeing, and just reports that have been put out by the likes of Dave Naylor and whatnot, this is because of coaches not being vaccinated and literally having to make a move. I mean, what do you make of this?
Well, it's I'm not surprised to see Chris Jones coming back to the CFL. I think I'm surprised to see him coming back in mid-season to be a part of the Toronto Argos, and that there's a vaccination aspect to it. I guess we have to expect the unexpected a lot this year, don't we? It's just that's what's been going on so far, and I think it's going to continue to go on. But, Chris Jones did a very good job coaching in the Canadian Football League. He's a bit of a power tripper, I guess you might say, when he was in Saskatchewan, and I don't think everyone loved playing for him. I can't put words in his mouth, but I'm not sure whether Zach Collaros loved playing for him, but I think that he's a guy that is going to, if he gets his way back into the CFL, he's going to end up being a prominent figure in this league once again. He'll probably be a head coach again. He'll probably be somebody that some team is going to rely on to try to get them to a Grey Cup. He's done it before, and I think he can do it again. So it's probably a good thing for the CFL when somebody like that comes back. It's just a very unusual circumstance.
Well, absolutely. And I guess, I just bring it up because, sort of more of a big picture question. We sort of had the conversation as to if you're looking for players or if you're signing guys, you're probably not even consider bringing someone in that hasn't had their shots. But, as we get closer to NHL season, and interestingly enough, along the same lines, Sylvain Lefebvre is out with the Blue Jackets before even coaching a game. He was on Brad Larsen's staff. He's not getting it. You wonder whether there'll be more stories like this in the National Hockey League of coaches, but also players, Ted. Just how difficult will it be for players that, I'm sure there are some that haven't yet done it, and, whether they'll be able to go and work the way they would expect to be.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's going to be very interesting to watch, and it's coming up to a deadline here in the CFL soon enough when the rules for airline travel are going to come into play, and you're going to have to be vaccinated to do that, even on charter flights. So there's CFL teams we know that don't have, necessarily high enough vaccination rates. The Bombers are over 85%, and I think if we're it's probably more like 95%. And I think there's the Roughriders said they were at that, but there's at least 5 teams that aren't at 85% yet. And they're going to face, they got to make sure they get this done, or there's going to be guys that aren't going to be able to travel with them. And if you can't travel with them, why are you on the team anymore? You may as well just say goodbye. And I think that's going to happen in other sports as well. People have to take it seriously. And honestly, I don't, I'm very pro vaccination. That's all there is to it. I believe in it. I think it's the right way to go. I think if you're someone who is holding out against it for your principles in that situation with a professional sports team, you have to decide whether your principles are more important than your contribution to the team or to the team itself. And those players who choose not to, they're not going to be able to participate, and potentially if they're a high impact player, they're not going to be able to help their team. So it's a bit of a different scenario for them than maybe just your average person who doesn't necessarily even go out that much, and maybe they think differently about it. But when you're really involved in something like this, you just got to take it seriously, and you got to really weigh what the consequences might be.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It's a high stakes hill to die on, and we are seeing some people do exactly that. Ted Wyman's with us. Hey, Ted, just before we go, what's happened on the curling scene? I was chatting with Chris Abbott last night, and man, a couple months away from deciding who's representing Canada at the Olympics.
Yeah, that's it's really kind of a crazy early season for curling. They are jumping into the pre-trials. There's a direct entry into the trials event with only a few teams. 3 out of 5, I think, on each side can qualify and go directly into the trials. The other 2 would have to go into the pre-trials event, which is later on. And it's just a mad scramble to try to get in. And not everybody's happy about it. I'll tell you that. Not everybody's happy about the way it was decided. Some of these teams thought they had trials berths already, and they're still going to have to go through more qualifying just to get in. I can tell you the teams that are in are extremely happy about that, and not even playing much right now. The rest of them are playing today. Matty Dunstone and Mike McEwen were playing this morning in a event in Ontario at the Oakville Tankard, the Stu Cells, and they're out there. Here we are, second week in September, and they're out there on the grind right now, trying to play as many games as they can before they get into the direct entry, before they get into the pre-trials, and before they hopefully are playing in the Olympic trials at the end of November. It's a huge year, and it's all crammed in because of the lack of qualifying events last year. It's going to be really interesting, and I don't want to give away too much, Huss, but since you asked about curling, I think you should watch winnipegsun.com for a pretty big story about some very significant rule changes that are coming down in curling as of 2022. It's going to be quite a change in the sport.
Ooh, I like the tease, Ted. Well, in addition to that, what do you got cooking up in the sun heading into the Bombers' trip to Edmonton on the weekend?
Well, I think we're going to have a story on Sean McGuire today, who is, I think, had a pretty entertaining last couple of weeks, scoring 5 touchdowns, Mr. 1 yard right there. And, of course, getting that big pass. So that's one to watch for. And, Jets training camp coming up this week, too, with rookie camp. Huss, busiest month of the year. It always is here in September, but it always is such an enjoyable time. And I love being a part of all of it.
Dude, we love having you on the program. Thanks so much for doing this. Enjoy this evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Huss, and to Remo as well.
Right on. There he is, Ted Wyman of the Winnipeg Sun, breaking down the Banjo Bowl, the Bombers heading into Edmonton, and all the latest from the Canadian Football League. We're going to go from 3-down football to 4-down football. We got Monday night tonight to finish up a very eventful week 1. We'll do that with Brad Gagnon in just a second. I do want to thank our friends at Little Brown Jug. They had a great big event for Pride on Friday, and it was great to have Kyra on the program as well, talking burgers and Burger Week on Friday. But they do still have those limited edition Pride cans with $1 from each can going to, I believe, the Rainbow Foundation. Now, you can get those at the tap room on William Avenue, or you can order them online at littlebrownjug.ca. Again, still offering delivery throughout the city of Winnipeg, and you can get that great taste of 1919 at your favorite local watering hole as well. And by the way, check out, they may still have the summer lager, which was just phenomenal. We had that in the variety packs all year. I got some kegs as well that are available. So if you're thinking on maybe really stocking up, talk to them down at the tap room about maybe a keg of that amazing summer lager from our friends at Little Brown Jug. A big shout out to our Nick and Nikki in the DQ group with DQs in Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. Lots of celebrating going on. Kids are back in school. You got birthday parties, people getting together again. And no better way to do that with the DQ cake. And you can order it, get it custom made in advance. Hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. They'll take the order and get it ready to pick up at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQ locations. And while you're in there, you might want to grab an Ultimate Grill Burger and definitely one of the world famous blizzards. And again, we got to thank our friends at Boston Pizza. Of course, Burger Week, still a couple more days. You've got the C's Burger over at Route 90, Kenniston. You got the Jalapeno Bacon Mac and Cheeseburger, which they're doing at the Taylor location, and the Bourbon Barbecue Bacon Burger out at Henderson. But a big thanks to Andrew, Crystal, and the great staff at Boston Pizza City Place, who hosted us for the live lock shop on Friday night. And again, thanks to everyone that came out. Great way to kick off Banjo Bowl weekend. Awesome to see so many people from Winnipeg Sports Talk out there. And as always, a great night in the lounge out at Boston Pizza. Big thanks to them. You can order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, let's get to the National Football League scene. And always great to catch up with NFL national reporter Brad Gagnon of Bleacher Report. Brad, what's up? Great to talk to you again, and welcome to our new home here at Winnipeg Sports Talk. What's going on?
Not much. Thanks for welcoming. I can still speak despite the new home. Into the new home. Looks like you got a really cool thing going on here, and I'm happy to join you guys talk some NFL.
Well, this is it. I've been holding off hitting you up because I knew this was the time we wanted to get the band back together, talk about week 1 in the National Football League, and had a little bit of everything. And honestly, just before we get to Sunday's action, hell of a Thursday nighter to get things going. I mean, there were some pretty pedestrian offensive performances by a few teams yesterday. Certainly wasn't the case from the Cowboys and the Buccaneers. What was your takeaway from the opener before we get to Sunday?
Well, I mean, there were some obvious goats on both sides of the ball. It was kind of one of those games where like a few guys are going to win it or lose it for you. And, the good news for Dallas is that wasn't Dak Prescott. The good news for Dallas is they nearly beat the defending Super Bowl champions and a Super Bowl favorite along with Kansas City, despite the fact that, they didn't have Zach Martin, one of the best guards in the game, that, we weren't sure how Tyron Smith was going to perform coming back from his injury last year and what he has in him right now. And of course, Dak alone had questions. So they didn't utilize Zeke Elliott very much. If you looked at that picture that I just painted, you'd think they got crushed, and yet they still, almost beat the Bucs, and the Bucs gave them some openings. I mentioned there were some goats, right? There was the fumble, there was the ball that bounced off of Fournette's hands and resulted in a turnover. The Bucs were sloppier than we're used to seeing them, and it was a slow start for them, and they recovered and still won. But you walk away from that, I think you're more excited if you're a Cowboys fan with that performance than you are excited if you're a Bucs fan. It was just holding on for dear life for Tampa Bay, and they know they're going to be there at the end of the year. They're going to be competitive and have a chance at the Super Bowl again, but you expected to win that game much more handily than they did. And if you're the Cowboys, you kind of, you probably feared a blowout and or at least a one-sided game. It often is on those Thursday night openers, especially, that atmosphere, this they're raising the banner. You're at home. It's a full crowd for, the first time since COVID. And to hang in was, a strong indication, at least that, week 1's a questionable indicator sometimes, but, you can't be too discouraged if you're the Cowboys right now.
Tell you what, I'll tell you a group of people that hope that week one was not an indication of what's to come, and those are the Cheeseheads in Wisconsin. Aaron Rodgers, 133 yards and 2 picks. They lose by 35 in what basically was a neutral site game. Hard to imagine it going much worse for the Packers in week one, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you're right. We talk about week one not being necessarily predictive, but it doesn't mean it can be thrown out entirely. It's 1 of 17 for each team, 1 of 18 for the league, and weeks for the league, and it matters. It means something. And the fact is, the team's never won the NFC Championship after losing by even 20 points in week one. A team's never gone on to the Super Bowl after losing. The Patriots lost 31-0 to the Bills in week one in 2003. One of the weirdest results you'll find on any past Pro Football Reference pull-up. And that was the only time a team's really been really crushed in week one and still gone on to be a Super Bowl team. They could be the exception to that rule, but it's not a good sign. Like, that's not a good precedent. It's pretty indicative of the fact that usually if you get hammered in week one, it's tough to kind of really pull back from. So, this was going to go one of two ways, likely, right? It was going to be Aaron Rodgers, the same Aaron Rodgers who had a fire lit under him when they drafted Jordan Love in the first round a year ago, went out and dominated the league in the first few weeks in particular. Green Bay got off to a very strong start, and he got off to a great start, went on to be the MVP of the league, and they were a Super Bowl contender with 13 wins. Or it was going to be he's checked out. He came back because he had to come back, because essentially at that point in time, it was too late to pull off a trade, and he was going to have to sit out the entire season or retire, which apparently he was even considering right up until he decided to come back with that reworked contract. And he is just here to collect his check and to not be fined and to not have to retire and moving on, which would be unfortunate to essentially, waste a year of your Hall of Fame career. You think he'd put everything into it as a competitor. I'm sure he will. I don't want to think that's the path he's taking. But then there's also the possibility that that's just the path he ends up on if they start poorly, right? If they all of a sudden choke up against the Lions, who always put up a bit of a fight against the Packers, and put up a heck of a fight against San Francisco in their first game. That's week 2. If they slip up there, and they're 0-2, or even like it's not an overly encouraging performance, and he still doesn't have his left tackle, and he still doesn't have much receiving depth beyond Devontae Adams, I could see him and this entire situation becoming very toxic like it was in the offseason, and then all of a sudden you wonder where the Packers season's headed.
Well, let's stay in the North, because, the one positive for them is that they're tied for first at 0-1 because every team in the division lost yesterday. No surprise, Detroit, as you mentioned, a pretty valiant comeback to try to get back in that game. But I got to tell you, there's some pretty anxious Minnesota Viking fans around these parts after they lost to Cincinnati. It's interesting to see the teams that had issues with COVID and the quarterbacks and not getting vaccinated. You saw the Vikings was a big spot. The Bills was a big spot. You wonder whether some of those teams were dealing with more things than maybe teams like the Bucs and Chiefs were, who came out pretty much with their whole team good to go and not worrying about that. But just thoughts on the Vikings' performance and, trying to turn it around after a very imminently winnable game went into the loss column.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the Colts were also under-vaccinated compared to the rest of the league. And interestingly enough, all three of those teams lost in week one. But regardless, the Vikings themselves, the thing is, Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins. You're going to get these great performances. Once in a while, you're going to get a stretch where he looks like he's the best quarterback in the NFL for 3 or 4 weeks, and then you're going to get these lulls, and you never know when they're going to come. And there's, you're so dependent on your quarterback in this league that regardless of Dalvin Cook's performances, and regardless of even how much support he gets from Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, if he's not on his game, then they don't stand much of a chance. And if he's on his game, then maybe they can make a run. And that's been the case since he came to the Vikes. And this performance again, it wasn't enough to beat the Bengals, who I'm worried about. I like what they've done to the secondary. I'm still worried about the defensive front, and whether they have enough firepower to take advantage of a team like Cincinnati that has offensive line issues, that's got a quarterback coming back from injury who might be a little bit skittish with that ACL, and the Vikings didn't have enough to really fully exploit that in this case. I thought it would be a close game. I think the thing is, I wouldn't be on the ledge if I was the Vikings or a Vikings fan, because I think Cincinnati is a better team than a lot of people realize. So it's a team that they played continually 1-score games when they had Burrow healthy last year. Now he comes back from his injury. They've got Jamar Chase added to the receiving core. The line looks a lot better. That was the big problem last year. This is a decent team. We don't talk about them much because they're likely going to be the fourth team in the AFC North regardless, but they're not a bad football team. And for them at home to play a close game, take the Vikings to overtime and pull off the victory wasn't surprising. It wasn't surprising to the Vegas odds makers who had it within that field goal spread, bouncing back and forth. And so, it's not something I'd be overly discouraged by out of, the first out of 17. In fact, looking at the teams in that division, I'd be more encouraged if I were a Vikings fan right now, certainly, than if I were a Packers fan, and probably even a Bears fan over a Packers fan, because Chicago at least put up a bit of a fight against the Rams, and no one expected them to last night.
Yeah, as choked as Viking fans were after the early games, I'm sure they cracked a bit of a smile seeing the New Orleans Saints put that whooping on the Packers the way they did in the following game. Well, let's talk about that Bills-Steelers game. I mean, TJ Watt signing the contract late last week, earning his money with a huge play that really turned that game over. But, a great performance by the Pittsburgh defense, who, really sort of dominated that game in the second half. How big of a win is this from Mike Tomlin's club? And what sort of a setback do you make it for the Bills, who now we're going on the road in the division next week in week 2?
So it kind of goes back to like that idea of where your head's at after week 1 and how much that's going to affect you long term. We talk about the fact that Bills had this kind of this Cole Beasley vaccine related distraction throughout the summertime, and they were going to have to prove that wasn't going to be a problem, and they haven't proven that based on this performance. Having the punt blocked, and that's not on Cole Beasley in particular, but you talk about preparation and distractions, right? And they just weren't as crisp. They weren't as prepared. They weren't ready for this moment, which is a shame because it was the first time they had a huge crowd in Buffalo for a home opener with Super Bowl level expectations, and they didn't have that last year because of COVID-19. And they sort of laid an egg, right? It just wasn't a great performance from Josh Allen and the offense. They were out of sync. But big special teams gaffe, big play from TJ Watt that changed the game, as you mentioned. So you go up against a fierce defense. You go against a team that hasn't had a losing record in 18 years, and despite the fact that they're supposed to be kind of falling off a cliff this year, we've been saying that for a few years about them, and they had a tough offseason, and Ben Roethlisberger is 85 years old and all these things. But at the end of the day, great defense, well-coached team, veteran team, experienced team that just finds a way to be in it. They found a way to be in it. And they're not as good as Buffalo. Buffalo's way more talented than Pittsburgh, but when the breaks aren't going your way, and when you're not as well prepared for the situation, that's what happens. And that's really what it was, I think, in this case.
Full marks to the Cleveland Browns for running the football, getting the lead, but it was Mahomes' magic time in that second half. I mean, a big win for the Chiefs, but I think a lot of positives for the Browns to take away, despite the fact that a few self-inflicted issues turning the football over in the second half of the game really gave the Chiefs the opportunity to retake the lead.
Yeah, the Browns and Ravens are those two teams that just can't get over the Chiefs hump. Now the Browns have joined that club with a January performance where they put up a great effort and lost in the playoffs. And now, again, back at Arrowhead, they look like they're going to take them down again, and they don't pull it off. They don't execute in the fourth quarter, and the Chiefs get the best of them. But eventually those things turn, and every opportunity you have, every jab you have, right, eventually you're going to get through. And it kind of reminds me as a Raptors guy of them playing, LeBron every year in the playoffs, and then slowly kind of making some progress, and it might never result in anything. It didn't in terms of that specific battle, but the Raptors did end up winning a championship and finally having that experience to get through. So the more Cleveland has these experiences against these juggernaut teams, the more they're going to get comfortable in those spots and actually may eventually be able to finish in those spots. And so, that's again an issue that their division mate in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson has had the last couple of years. Usually when you're that good as Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are, and as the Browns are, you eventually get through, and you don't become that team that just wilts for 5 or 6 or 7 years and then just forces out a rebuild. It has happened that way, but I think Cleveland is going to poke through eventually, and I think this was another indication that they're right there with the Chiefs in terms of talent, in terms of skill, and the Chiefs are pretty vulnerable on defense, and the Browns showed that. They revealed that, and teams are going to continue to exploit those weak spots, especially in their linebacking core, especially on the ground, and they're going to have a target on their back throughout this season as a result of being in the Super Bowl the last 2 years. So I don't know who's going to take them down. maybe nobody, but the Browns are a candidate, and they showed that on Sunday.
Yeah, no, they're definitely going to be a problem, and that running game is legit. I mean, that two-headed monster of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, combined with that offensive line, I mean, we saw how problematic it was, especially early in the game for Kansas City to hold back, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon. As far as the West goes, I mean, really in the AFC, you just mentioned it, the Chiefs are setting the bar. They're the team to beat. They've won the AFC the last 2 years, and they've owned the AFC West pretty much ever since Andy Reid got to Arrowhead. But big wins for Denver and the Chargers, both on the road out east in week 1. What impressed you about what the Chargers were able to do, as well as Teddy Two Gloves getting his first win as a Bronco starter?
Yeah, we all figured the Chargers had the talent finally, especially now they've upgraded that offensive line for Justin Herbert. And, there was, of course, concerns. Well, maybe Herbert will have a sophomore slump. He's got to get used to a new offensive coordinator. How is that process going to go? That was a fair concern. I thought, if anything, it would just be I thought Washington wins that game, because I'm thinking, I just don't know how acclimated they're going to be and how much time it's going to take, because there was a lot of big changes, and continuity in an offensive line is the key to everything there. So they didn't have that, and they didn't matter. They came through and they beat one of the best defensive teams in football, and Herbert looked fantastic. And so it's hard not to be fired up about the Chargers. I think that it's probably for the first time in a few years, there's a team that could really push the Chiefs in that division, then it's probably them. I don't know if I trust Teddy Bridgewater yet, but the performance was really encouraging. Is he all of a sudden turning a corner at this point in his career? Does he have the ability to carry a team? Does he have to carry the Broncos? These are all the questions that we'll be asking about the Broncos headed into week 2 and beyond. Is if they're that good defensively, especially up front, and actually the entire way through, they upgraded the secondary dramatically in the offseason too, and they drafted Surtain in the top 10. So, if that defense is as good as it can be, then you don't maybe need to have a guy dominate with his arm on the offensive side of the ball. And so he was an asset, not a liability in this case. He can afford to be a liability occasionally if the defense is going to be that good, but the margin for error in that division is very small. And I just mentioned the Chargers are still a more talented team. They still have the quarterback that has a lot more promise. So the fact is they have competition. Both those teams are going to probably put up a fight. I wouldn't be shocked if the Raiders put up a bit of a fight as well. I don't think they're slaying the Chiefs in that division, but they have a shot tonight against a bruised, banged up Baltimore team at home, and they're essentially their debut in front of the Vegas fans. And they've definitely gotten better this offseason too. So that division is going to be tougher on Kansas City, which I think is going to create an interesting dynamic, because they've had the advantage of being able to kind of beat up on their division for the last couple of years, while Buffalo and especially the teams in the AFC North are all getting beating up on each other. Now it might kind of bring things back to the center, where the Chiefs have to actually fight within the division a little bit more as well.
I saw one of the craziest stats, and I didn't fact check this, but Teddy Bridgewater on the road in 25 starts is 22-3 against the spread.
ATS. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good one. So that's a sample that I'll take too, right? I mean, you give me 25 games for a guy, like there's something to that mentally, emotionally, whatever it is, that he's away from home and he's able to at least cover. And in this case, obviously get a nice win against the Jets so it was the Giants. So it was a situation where, again, I didn't have much faith in him, but the guy has always won. And he doesn't make mistakes. And sometimes that's, I think we underestimate that. We don't give that enough love. It's like sometimes you just need to be the Alex Smith. And those quarterbacks have won Super Bowls. I don't think that's happening this year in Denver, but they're a playoff caliber team if things go right. And if he can continue to I don't think he's a custodian. I think he's better than that, but somewhere in between. He doesn't need to be Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, well, I think they made the right choice. I mean, he will give them the competent quarterbacking and hopefully not turn the ball over like Drew Lock did. And that, with the defense like that is really sort of what they need. Brad Gagnon of Bleacher Report's with us. We're breaking down week 1 of the National Football League season. We'll get to the Monday Nighter in a second. But let me ask you about the NFC West. I mean, to me, top to bottom, probably the most competitive division in the National Football League. We saw Matt Stafford make his debut, look very good in his new home last night at SoFi. You had the Niners blow them out and then all of a sudden have some nervous moments there at the end against Detroit of all teams. Russ wins on the road in Indy with the Seahawks. And the performance maybe that surprised me the most was Kyler Murray and the Cardinals going in and absolutely thumping the Titans out in Nashville. What caught your eye when it comes to the 4 teams in the NFC West in week 1, Brad?
Yeah, I found it interesting that everyone was sort of down, not really down on, but not really believing in the Cardinals based on the one season of underachievement, right? I mean, remember how hyped they were just a year ago? They were the team all of a sudden. It's like, okay, they're going to take off this year. And they were one of the, the hot teams forever in Super Bowl predictions, their playoff predictions, what have you. And then they go out after an offseason that was completely ruined by COVID-19 and no preseason, whether adjusting to a brand new star receiver for Kyler Murray, where Kyler Murray it was supposed to be his first full offseason with Cliff Kingsbury after being drafted the year before. That was damaged by the pandemic situation. So I think it was unfair of us to already kind of give up on the Cardinals based on one sort of underwhelming season when they were supposed to be good. They got even better this offseason, right? I mean, Chandler Jones comes back from his injury. You add J.J. Watt to the defensive front. You add another linebacker in Zaven Collins in the first round of the draft to support Isaiah Simmons. Those two could become an incredible duo together. So they're pretty solid on both sides of the ball. And now we're coming off that first full, proper, uninterrupted offseason for both Kingsbury and Murray together. So, you put those circumstances together and you think, okay, they could be pretty good. Like, they were supposed to be good a year ago. They've got the talent to be good right now. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt for last year. And so I didn't think they'd, crush Tennessee. I had them beating Tennessee. I thought they'd be right there. I think they're going to be right there all season. And, in a lot of other divisions, if they're in the NFC East, they're the favorite. Right. And there's a few other divisions where they're a lot more competitive. The problem, of course, is, Seattle, if they continue to play the way they did in week 1, then it's, they're unbeatable almost. They always start like this. It feels like Russell Wilson in particular. We'll see if they can keep this up over the course of the season. They don't have a lot of depth. Arizona's deeper than Seattle, in my opinion. Seattle's more top heavy. They have more talent at the top end. Russell Wilson's, obviously more established than Kyler Murray. But Arizona's got a very deep roster. And, San Francisco's already having the same old injury issues right out of the gate. Hopefully they can, stay relatively healthy this year. If they do, they're another 10, 11, 12 win team. And then you mentioned the Rams, right? I mean, 2 Madden 99s. There's Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald on the defensive side of the ball, and now Matthew Stafford in a new environment with more support and Sean McVay's offensive genius behind him. I mean, again, all 4 of those teams are favorites in other divisions. And I don't know who the favorite right now is because it's just all 4 of them look so impressive. I would still go Seattle's way. I still get behind Russell Wilson as a guy who eventually is going to have that MVP season. Maybe this is it. But it's going to be wild to see that one of those teams won't get through. And whoever gets through, even if it's 3 of them, their record won't show how good they are because they've been beating up on each other in that division. And a team like Dallas or Washington or Philly or the Giants is going to have just as much playoff credence as any of them, which is kind of a shame.
Hey, you mentioned Philly. I mean, we've talked about, the Bills and the Packers, some of the teams that had some disappointing week 1 losses. From a surprising side, on a good note, Eagles fans have to be fired up over Nick Sirianni, and man, did Jalen Hurts look good. I don't know how much we can put into a win over the Falcons with a new head coach and rebuilding, but I'll tell you what, I didn't have them blowing out the Falcons on the road the way they did. What did you think of the Eagles?
Yeah, you're still going on the road against Matt Ryan, like an established quarterback, and a team that's not great, but isn't like a joke. The Falcons aren't going to be a 3-win team this year, I don't think. Maybe a 5-win team or 6-win team. Regardless, it was really encouraging, actually. And again, we go back to the whole week 1 is not necessarily indicative, but Jalen Hurts looked decent last year, and he flashed in those first couple starts. And there was, there's hope for the guy. This is a 2nd-round pick who, had a great college career. Like, there's no reason to assume he can't become something really good in this league, even a franchise quarterback. And in terms of Sirianni getting his guys, in a position to crush a team on the road in week 1, that's a very promising sign. I think the one thing we forget about with the Eagles, because we get caught up on Hurts and the constantly underwhelming or underperforming receiving core, and the secondary, which still does stink, is that in the trenches, they're still one of the best, most talented teams in football. They get Brandon Brooks, and Lane Johnson back from injury, the offensive line is fantastic if those guys are all healthy, and we saw that against Atlanta. And Fletcher Cox is still a all-pro, second team all-pro caliber player. Brandon Graham is a good player. Like, there's a lot of young talent up front and experience up front in the defensive side of the ball with that wide nine. So, like, in the trenches, they're fantastic. They still are. That's never changed. And as long as those guys are healthy, which is a big question mark, so far they are. They haven't been able to maintain that in recent seasons. Then it's going to be a lot easier for Jalen Hurts to be successful, and a lot easier for them to mask that bad secondary. And let's not forget, there's still talent in that receiving core, right? It's 2 first-round picks in a row out there, and one of them looked darn good with Jalen Hurts in week 1. So if Rieger and Smith can put it together this year, like, Philly can absolutely win that division. I mean, the division's wide open, always has been, but they could be a decent team. It's not out of the question at all.
Brad, I don't know about you. The thing that was the weirdest from a spectating performance was wrapping my head around and getting used to all these new single-digit numbers that certain players were wearing. You're seeing them on new teams, like James Conner's number 6 for Arizona. Like, it was just weird. But there were a lot of new players and a pretty star-studded rookie class. Just of the NFL debutantes yesterday, which rookies stood out to you with their performance in their debut?
Well, I mean, Smith right off the bat. Obviously we only saw the quarterbacks in kind of small, 2 of the quarterbacks in Fields in particular, just in the 1 or 2 passes, Fields and Lance. Trevor Lawrence, it was a little bit discouraging to see the three interceptions. But yeah, the receivers in particular, obviously Devontae Smith having an immediate, kind of chemistry with Jalen Hurts is really promising. Kyle Pitts, we knew was going to take some time. The tackles, it seems like those top end tackles, it seems like none of them are going to have that immediate impact that we saw from like Tristan Wirfs last year for Tampa Bay. And so it might be a bit rocky. It was rocky on the first Sunday, but yeah, to see Smith have that, that going, and Trevor Lawrence still made some nice throws and a really nice touchdown pass in particular. So there's still some hope there. And Zach Wilson looked pretty good for the Jets as well. They both had their moments, Lawrence and Wilson. Where it's like, okay, and then it's like, oh, okay, but that's how it's supposed to be in week 1.
Certainly. Who kind of caught my eye, and we'd heard a lot about Jamar Chase and dropping balls in the preseason and having a tough time because there weren't the white stripes on the ball. He looked really good, and credit to Joe Burrow. And I got to tell you, Jalen Waddle looks like a player for the Miami Dolphins. I was really impressed with. I think Brian Flores is a great coach. That team, is ready to win games if they get the quarterback play. But I'll tell you what, having a weapon like Jalen Waddle with what we saw in game 1 from him, very, very good news for Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah, interesting, the familiarity that the quarterbacks of those teams have with the receivers, all of the receivers we just mentioned from their college days. So maybe that helps to have that immediate impact in week 1. Of course, Burrow and Chase had maybe the best battery season ever in college football together in 2019 at LSU. So, that might have been a factor. Miami in particular, they have a very deep receiving core, right? And Will Fuller will be coming back from his suspension as well. And all of a sudden you've got 3-4 really solid options plus 2 good tight ends. Offensive line remains a bit of a question mark for them, but if they've got young talent there, if that talent can actually start to make progress this season, Tua could have a very good chance to make progress himself. It's somewhat dependent on that. He didn't have that support last year. He was thrown to the Wolves mid-season, coming off a major hip injury in college, and it wasn't surprising that he struggled, but I think it was too early to rule him out. A lot of folks were already giving up on him. There's already talk about them wanting to trade for Deshaun Watson, but I think he deserves a nice full season with a little bit more support, especially in the receiving core this season. The defense looks fantastic. Brian Flores has really got that unit going. So he won't have to score 30 points very often to win games. And he's got the receivers to do it once in a while anyway. So there's no excuse if it doesn't happen this year. Put it that way. He's going to have 17 opportunities if he's healthy to bring a team to the playoffs. And he's got a coach who's done a great job so far. So the path is there. The division will be tough. We talked about Buffalo and New England, but they both lost out of the gate. So we have an early edge as well.
Brad, this has been awesome. Last one on the way out. What are you expecting to see tonight in the Monday Nighter?
I kind of hinted at it. I kind of feel like the Raiders could win this one. I mean, Baltimore does. I mentioned Seattle starts crazily strong, but like Baltimore every year, it seems like they're winning like 53-6 in the first week for some reason. So I wouldn't rule it out. I'll say this now, and then the Ravens will run away with it. But I think the Raiders in front of their crowd for the first time ever in Vegas, considering the Ravens have lost about 17 running backs in the last 2 weeks and lost their number one cornerback. Yeah, that's going to be really tough on them. It's going to be a tough environment. I think the Raiders, at the very least, put up a fight. I think it's +4. Field goal game makes a lot of sense, so I'm kind of leaning that way. But don't quote me on it, and don't send me an invoice if I steer you in the wrong direction.
Hey, don't worry. I'm glad to hear that. I was already on the Raiders plus the 4.5, I think, earlier this weekend, and now we just see if we can finish up a great week and hopefully have a great game. Brad, always love having you on the program. Let's do it again soon. All the best, and keep up the great work. We're loving what you're cranking out over at BR.
Sounds great. Thanks. Look forward to joining you guys soon.
Great. Give him a follow on Twitter, folks, at Brad_Gagnon. And you can follow him, national reporter for National Football League, over at Bleacher Report. All right, lots of other things that we do need to get to, but do want to thank our friends at Canadian Club. And a special congratulations to P. Sambo, who won the epic Friday marble race for the special Banjo Bowl giveaway of that special Canadian Club Chronicles 42-year-old bottle of whiskey. There was plenty of CC being poured at the Banjo Bowl. I will tell you that much. People were being well refreshed by the folks out at the Rum Hut, the Jim Beam Still House, and a lot of great CC out there, both before and after the game. So a big thanks to them for their support. Obviously, the official spirit of the Bombers and big supporters of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. It's great to have Canadian Club on board with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And tonight begins the final week of live racing out at Assiniboia Downs. Now, Wednesday night is going to be the big night, the $1 million prize for the jackpot high five for a single winner. Some more added give-outs for the mandatory payouts for Wednesday. So if you're thinking about, we still should get out to the track, I think Remo and I are going to try and get out there on Wednesday night for the final day of live racing, with a few extra goodies for you. Of course, they'll get added tonight, 7:30, parade to post, 6:45. The guys will get it going on Assiniboia Downs live, where you'll get the good picks from Stretch and Kirk. And, of course, 3 more days. After that, though, Assiniboia Downs will be open. VLTs, 9 a.m. until 12:15 daily. And, of course, the Terrace Dining Room open as well. But you do need to make reservations. You can find out more at asdowns.com. We'll get to our Coolbet lines in just a couple minutes, but let's get Michael Remis back in here. And Remo, great NFL chat with Brad. Awesome catching up with Ted, talking all things Blue Bombers. And in the meantime, a few things happening in hockey. I do see in the chat that Elliot Friedman tweeted out the Joona Luoto era of the Winnipeg Jets is now over. Sounds like he's been given his release. Probably going back to Finland, I'd imagine.
Yeah, Elliot, he tweeted Jets, actually. He didn't tweet win, all capitals. So people who hate his poor acronym usage, which intentional or not, score a point there. And that's including me. But yeah, he just tweeted they mutually, they released him in order to terminate the contract. He played 16 games with the Jets in 2019-20. Didn't register a point. Last season, he spent with the Moose, played 11 games, had 4 points. I saw Murat, who we had talked with last week, said, he's just, think he's speculating that Luoto will return to Finland, and that, the NHL right now, as far as the Jets are concerned, seems farther away than it did in 1920 when he played 16 games. So that's something we'll wait and see, but we did have some Jets news today about that.
It is funny. I mean, obviously we'll always hit Jets news, but there just simply hasn't been any over the course of the last 2 to 3 weeks. And it speaks to, how successful the offseason was right out of the gate for the Winnipeg Jets. And now we'll look forward to, talking more about it as the rookies get to town and we get training camp going in not too long. I guess later on this week, really, they'll be in town getting out at the rink, and we'll actually get full training camp going, I believe, next week at this time.
Yeah, that's what Ted said, and I'm following a number of other writers on Twitter. I'm seeing like the Leafs rookie camp lines being tweeted out, the Sens. So other teams are starting with the rookies, and I know in the summers, is there a development camp? And it just seems like all the teams, at least the Canadian ones, are bringing the rookies in early before main camp to get a little shortened thing. And then we are a couple weeks away from the first preseason game. It is September 26th at home against Ottawa. And I did just get an email, Huss. I am on the Jets mailing list for the exclusive Jets mail presale. So single season ticket games are going on sale. If you did get that email, I know Jeff Kabilas in chat also said he got the email. And yeah, I mean, hockey season is around the corner. And if you want some Jets talk, I mean, not a lot to get to, but we'll be all over the Jets training camp. And if you want to, visit our past shows, we had Murat on last week. There's videos on our YouTube with Mike McIntyre and Jamie Thomas, as well as conversations with a number of Jets players, Nate Schmidt, Brendan Dillon, who's on there, Andrew Kopp, Logan Stanley. So it's been a real fun summer, but now it's time, we've put the roster together. Let's see what it can do.
Yeah, if you want to catch up on any of that Jets content, it's all there at our YouTube page. And yeah, I mean, we will, I can't not wait to get going with training camp and be talking more about it. But obviously coming out of the Banjo Bowl weekend and the week 1 of NFL without much going on in Jetland, this is certainly the focus going forward. But this is the best time of year. I mean, we've got the NFL back. The CFL is in full swing. The Bombers are in first place. And I can't remember this much excitement about Winnipeg Jet training camp than we've had this year, considering what's happened in the offseason. And I guess, as you guys mentioned, the ability to buy tickets and get out back to the now newly named Canada Life Center for Winnipeg Jets hockey at some point this season. It is going to be fun.
You mentioned Canada Life Center. We were walking to Boston Pizza downtown. I parked in my usual spot, walking over to City Place, just like old times. I don't think I had been downtown, I guess when I got my shot, it was the last time I was probably downtown in the summer. But before that, I mean, maybe during a Jets game, I have no reason to go down there. But I did see the new Canada Life sign on the arena, and I was like, oh, right, that's the new name. It looks totally different, and I am looking forward to seeing some of the upgrades. I know they have got a projection on ice system for the games. We've been clamoring for that, so let's see if they can have some fun for the game. So
balls and the game ops guys are very excited about some of the new equipment they've got for the games coming up this year. I actually spent a ton of time downtown both Friday, and of course Dusty and Chris were both staying downtown. And a few trips by the old rink on the weekend got me very much looking forward to the next few weeks and to get games back going on and all of us back in that arena. Blue Jays continue to be on fire. They didn't get the sweep after losing on Friday, but just a bizarre, a 7-inning game, Reem, where they had been no hit through 6 and then put up 11 in 1 inning. And then yesterday, the Toronto Blue Jays outscored 13 NFL teams and put up 22 runs in the process. I know the bats were a little cold a couple weeks ago. Not the case right now. They are ripping the cover off the ball with every swing.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the standings here, and the Jays, they're tied for the wild card spot with the Red Sox, and they're the hottest team in baseball right now. They're keep 9. They lost Friday 9-1 in the last 10. Now they got a 3-game win streak. They just put runs upon runs against the Orioles, and that run differential is so high, and we were predicting this win streak, or we're hoping for it based on that, and they're one of the stronger teams in the league. I would not want to play them if I'm the Yankees or if I'm Boston, and as we move on towards the end of the month, they can start to maybe think about arranging their rotation in a way where you have your ace or whoever you want on the mound in that wild card game. As far as catching Tampa Bay, I think they're 9 games back, so I don't think that's going to happen here. 9 games. I don't think that's going to happen here in the last 2 weeks of the season, 2.5 weeks. But a wild card spot gives you you playing that exciting 1-game playoff to advance to the divisional round. So well done here by the Blue Jays, and we'll be following. This is a nightly thing now as we head towards the end of the season.
30 games left. We said, man, they're going to have to win 20 of these just to have a chance. They've gone, I think, 11-1 since we had that conversation. So they've done the difficult part. Now they got to stay up. The schedule is quite advantageous. And I guess the other great thing for the Jays, Reem, is the fact that the Red Sox and Yankees have a bunch of head-to-head games against each other. So with 2 spots there, if the Jays continue to take care of their business, they will be in that wild card game, and no one's going to want to play a red-hot Jays team in a short series.
No, I mean, from top to the bottom, their lineup is so strong. Simeon, breakout season. Springer's, making his way back to full health. Vlad, Bo, just very solid lineup. And now they're pitching. They got a bunch of great starters. So if you can get into if they can advance past the wild card into a divisional playoff round, it's going to be exciting. And I'm excited for all of Canada to hop on the Jays train, because we've seen it in the past. People here get crazy for the baseball when the Jays are playing well.
Well, the biggest bandwagon over the course of the last week when it comes to Canadian sports has been the Leila Annie Fernandez train at the U.S. Open, making it all the way to the final, beating the number 2, 3, and 5 seeds along the way, and setting up an unprecedented final in the Open era of 2 unseeded players in a Grand Slam. Emma Raducanu, the 18-year-old, Toronto-born, London-raised, against Leila Annie. And unfortunately for Leila, the Cinderella trip came 1 match short, losing in straight sets, Remis. And I know most of us, I certainly was at the Banjo Bowl. So after watching pretty much every point that she played for the last week and a half, missed it. Disappointed to hear the result. Did see her interview afterwards. Incredibly poised, classy, gracious. This young woman has become a star right in front of our eyes, and I don't think this will be the last we hear of Leila Fernandez.
Yeah, I agree with you. And she just turned 19, incredibly well-spoken, articulate, she's full of enthusiasm. So definitely a great ambassador for Canada and pro tennis. As far as the match, I was flipping back between, the final and the Banjo Bowl. And there were some real tough, deuces there in the first couple games. She just couldn't seem to put Raducanu away when she had the advantage. She'd put her on the ropes, and Raducanu fought back. And, as the second set went on, it was clear wasn't to be, but doesn't mean she didn't have a great tournament. I think she took just over $1 million in prize money, which is more than she had made in her entire career up to this point. And, we hope I think there's a couple tournaments left, including Indian Wells. So I hope to see her have more success on tour. And that's just another name in Canadian tennis that we're going to be following, as we saw Andreescu play well. She had to exit. She didn't exit due to injury, but it hampered her in her final game. Felix losing the semifinal on Friday, and Chapovalov as well. So you got 4 big stars, and that's just singles. I know Gabby Dabrowski's double as well.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I see Northside YEG stirring it up in the chat with some pretty funny Jets Oilers takes. See the playoffs, Northside? Just wondering. Anyways, this is great. Everyone, just be respectful. Have some fun with each other. While we're on the topic of the tennis, I know everyone in Canada was sort of really focused in on what was going on the women's side. There was a chance for history to be made yesterday. Novak Djokovic looking to complete the calendar Grand Slam, winning the Australian Open, winning Wimbledon, winning the French Open, and needing to complete all 4. But kind of a shocking outcome. And Daniil Medvedev has been amazing. He was the number 2 seed. But everyone sort of thinks of Joker and then everybody else. But the Russian stepping up after disposing of Felix Auger-Aliassime in the semi and taking Novak out in straight sets. And I'll tell you what, I'm here for it. I respect Djokovic's game. He's incredible, arguably the greatest ever. But I got to tell you, I was in on the underdog, and it was nice to see Medvedev get it. A guy that really has deserved maybe titles like this, but has had such a hard time breaking through that glass ceiling with a player like Djokovic on top of the world.
Yeah, and I know the men's side has been dominated by Djokovic, Federer, Nadal, and I see another name, and I know he had a pretty, the FIFA-style celebration. I don't really play FIFA, but I saw it was trending. There's any FIFA players in chat? It's called the dead fish celebration. I think he just laid there. I don't know, but
I'm glad you just brought up celebration for a minute, and we'll move back from tennis and back to the Banjo Bowl. The Bombers team celebration, playing all the instruments in the end zone, one of my favorite of all time. And the fact that it happened in the Banjo Bowl was great. But all the guys, someone was doing the drums. They had I know the Bombers have tweeted it out. I watched it a few times. If you haven't seen it, I love the team celebrations, especially with something like the Banjo Bowl with such a great crowd and an atmosphere. And it was pretty obvious that those guys were having a heck of a lot of fun during the game. And I'm sure they deserved to have a good time afterwards because everyone was having a hell of a time in the stands. And when you see getting into the end zone and having the entire offensive line and some of the skill players make a de facto live rock band in the end zone, I'm absolutely here for it.
Yeah, and we've seen it, some epic celebrations in the CFL, especially from the Bombers. The Duck Duck Goose one, and who are the guys who hopped in the boat?
Well, that was the Ticats. That was honestly,
yeah.
I was at the Bombers' expense, but it still is, even as someone that, obviously a Bomber fan watching it happen, one of the greatest celebrations of all time. And needless to say, the Bombers were somewhat asking for it by sticking that Lund in the back of the end zone. But when they did jump in there and then the Ticats doing the fishing reel in, it was
good.
You had to just sit back and laugh. What wasn't funny is I think they were really putting it to the Bombers in said game, but that was a long time ago. Hopefully we'll see some more musical performances in CFL end zones coming soon from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers after what they did to the Riders in the Banjo Bowl. Still wrapping my head around the fact that Sean McGuire's had 5 touchdowns in the last 2 games and Saskatchewan scored absolutely none.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think we need to give a shout out to Odell Willis. I know I sent this to you on Twitter, Huss.
The original mayor of Swaggerville.
Yes, here it is. He's tweeted out, alert. Willie Jefferson is the new mayor of Swaggerville 2.0. Hashtag crown has been passed. And that's pretty awesome. So I definitely love to see that Willie rocking the Swaggerville t-shirt on Friday and backing it up with his play this season. So I'm here for Swaggerville. I know there's people in chat who are not Swaggerville fans. I don't know why you wouldn't be, but you gotta love how great that they're playing.
I think back to 2011. Bombers were 7-1. Riders were 1-7. Going to the Labor Day game, and you would just see Bomber fans walking around Regina, just going swag. Rider fans. Unfortunately, they ended up losing both the Labor Day Classic and the Banjo Bowl. It sort of started a tough time in that season, but the defense did end up getting them all the way to the Grey Cup. And got to tell you, the reason why people are talking about Swaggerville is the fact that this defense reminds a lot of people of that 2011 group, which was unbelievable. Jovan Johnson won the most outstanding defensive player of the year. And they got all the way to the Grey Cup with a pretty pedestrian offense. This team far more well-rounded right now for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. All right, let's get to the Coolbet lines of the day. I have to say, so I had Chris from Coolbet with us. He came into town, had never been to Winnipeg before. Took him to the game, took him out yesterday to a few spots to watch NFL. It was amazing to hear and see from people just walking around the game and afterwards around town how many folks have joined us over at Coolbet. If you haven't already, you're thinking about maybe getting in for the NFL season, we've got an incredible bonus code, 100% deposit, up to $200 on your first deposit. Just use the promo code WST. And tell you what, I'm pretty hot right now. We'll see whether we can keep it going tonight in the Monday night or into next week, but it has been a great start so far. And before we get to the CFL lines, Remo, we do have a little bit of line movement in this Baltimore Raiders game tonight. This was as high as 4.5. I believe it was 4 earlier. I think some money coming in on the home team tonight. Raiders still a home dog and getting the hook, but not the full 4. 3.5 right now at even money for the Raiders.
Yeah, I'm curious seeing how Lamar Jackson's going to do. Is it true that the last time we saw him on Monday Night Football was him running to the locker room after
the dump game?
Yeah, if you want to call it the dump game, sure. So
I'll call it. I know. I believe there's an essay or something on TSN. I haven't watched it yet, but it was on the cover. I don't know. Matt Chinetti's been doing these, so I'm not sure whether it's him or somebody else. But they make it sound like this heroic return from after having to leave the game due to cramps. Yeah, Lamar Jackson cramps. Really? I mean, we all watched it. We knew what was up, which actually makes it that much more memorable. Lots of guys that have cramps, but the way Lamar left and then returned was pretty good. So yeah, we got Lamar Jackson in primetime tonight against the Raiders, and I imagine that crowd in Vegas is going to be wild. Both last night and tonight, we finally get to see these incredible new signature stadiums in the National Football League filled with fans after being empty for the last couple seasons.
Yeah, the Rams one looked really cool with their video screen on the inside there. And we'll take a look at Vegas tonight. I almost forgot about these teams. And it is kind of funny. You mentioned the new numbers, seeing certain guys. Who was it? Deshaun Jackson rocking number 1 last night. Like Julio Jones, who I just remembered earlier in the week was on the Titans, rocking a single-digit number. It's weird, man. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's something we're gonna have to get used to. And I'm just looking at some of the props here for tonight. I don't know. What are we thinking? I don't know.
Yeah, we've got some anytime touchdown score. Lamar Jackson's actually at -122, and that sort of does make sense because who knows what their backfield is going to look like. And then you got the 2 running backs for the Raiders, Josh Jacobs at +105, Kenyon Drake +120, and Darren Waller, their very accomplished tight end, at +120. First quarter totals we've got a first half spread of 2.5 for Baltimore. And basically the money line, if you just want to bet the team to win, Raiders -179. Raiders.
Favorite,
so Baltimore -179 and the Raiders +164. Let's move on over to the Canadian Football League because we have lines for the upcoming week. What stands out to you here, Reem? I'll read them out for people listening on the podcast. Hamilton, 3.5-point favorites at home against the Calgary Stampeders. The Saskatchewan Roughriders, 4-point favorites at home against the Toronto Argonauts. Montreal, just a 1-point favorite over the British Columbia Lions at home. And the Bombers, the lone road favorite of the week. 6 points they open as favorites against the Edmonton Elks. And this makes me nervous, Remo, because I think the way things went in the second end of the back-to-back for the Edmonton Elks, they're going to need to be much better, and we have seen them be better at times. I think this is going to be a closer game than maybe a lot of people think. At first glance, I'd probably take the points, but I do like the Bombers to be able to win the game.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of points. The Elks have been able to score pretty well. I know they didn't do that on this past game against Calgary. What stood out to me is the first 2 games, Calgary at Hamilton and Toronto at Saskatchewan. Hamilton announced today that Dane Evans is going to be out, I think it was 4 to 6 weeks. That just came out right before we started. Yeah, 4 to 6 weeks with a lower body injury. So who's their quarterback? Wofford or is Soley going to be back? We should be on top of that, who their quarterback is. That's something to watch. And
the third stringer, his name escapes me, was taking most of the reps today, although Masoli was there. But, man, that's a tough spot for Hamilton to be in because, I mean, they arguably had the best 1-2 punch quarterbacking in the league. Now, neither of those guys potentially, or at least were on the field today, running plays in practice. So we'll see how that goes going forward. But, yes.
The other one, too, Toronto against Saskatchewan, because Fajardo left. Is he going to play? And what's their injury situation? They're missing some DBs. And Arbuckle can throw deep. So I like those 2 underdogs in the first 2 games with the points. And then this BC Montreal, I'm not too sure. I guess I would lean Montreal, but it is a pick 'em. They're the home team favored by 1.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll stay on top of this. We'll see how the line moves. But if you want to get in right now for Monday Night Football, CFL, the upcoming Jets season, it's all there at coolbet.com. Speaking of which, actually, let's see, they have the NHL futures while we're at it.
We'll see. We've been waiting for watching the Jets one.
We do have the Canadian the Olympic outrights right now, and Canada opened at +190. And obviously all the Canadian fans jumped on that pretty quickly. But Canada +150 favorite. Then you got the U.S. at +425. Russia at +550. And Sweden +650. And Finland at...
I can't find those.
8-1. Yeah, they maybe don't have the NHL ones up right now. We may have lost that 50-1 on the Jets to win the Cup.
I should have jumped on it. Oh, here's the Olympic. Yeah, here's the Olympic outrights in Canada. I mean, there is KHL odds up here if you want it. Are those streaming? Like Dynamo Moscow -370 against Admiral Vladivostok? What do you think? Who's...
Oh, nice pick 'em between Jokerit and Lokomotiv Yaroslavl.
Yeah, I got to look at some of these rosters and do some scouting.
Oh, maybe they're start doing KHL DraftKings. Do they have that?
They should, because it's like 10:30 a.m., 11:30 a.m. Like, we could be watching these before the show. Maybe get some Akbar's Kazan versus HC Sochi. I guess that's all tomorrow morning. A full slate of AHL if you really need your hockey fix. But
Hey, Joey Panks, thank you. Yes, David Watford. That's the quarterback's name that was taking the snaps today for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Let's get to the picks for tonight, Remo. We've got 3 more days left. I got to swing for the fences. I got to get some big ones. I got a few upset picks tonight. Where are you going with your selections?
okay, and maybe we can figure something out for like Wednesday. We're gonna go and we can like do some. Oh, I didn't do that. I will hold on. I'm just logging in so I can bring it up.
Yeah, but that's kind of what we're thinking. It's Wednesday night, final day of live racing. Get on out to the track. So much like we had a chance to see a bunch of you that popped by on Friday over at Boston Pizza. We'll probably do something similar, or at least hook up with some people, make a few bets, have a couple cold ones, and enjoy the final day of live racing and hopefully get a piece of some of those massive mandatory payouts that are going out on Wednesday. Might even see if we can get Darren Dunn on the program before just to tee up the final day coming up on Wednesday.
Yeah, so I'm doing what I did. So last race day, Wednesday, I went 3 for 4, which was a good day for me. So I tripled up my $20 in bets. I was really happy about that. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing 2 winners and 2 triactor boxes. I'm starting out with race 3, and Otani is my horse to win.
Oh, Otani. Got to get one more jump on Otani before the end of the year.
Of course. So the best, probably winning MVP will win MVP of the track. We'll wait and see. Race 4, I'm going with Wits 10 to win as well. That's a $3 bet. And then I got a couple triactor boxes at the end. This one has race 6, 1, 4, and 5. Sophie McTrophy, Right of Vengeance, and Henry's in Control. Sophie McTrophy, a previous winner for me. And race 7, I'm going 3, 5, and 7. And Wara, Bellstrike, and Truly and Terrific, who's performed very well lately. It's not just a name, Truly and Terrific. They are a solid horse. So that's what I'm on here.
I'm going to race number 1, horse number 2. We need VLTs, please. Always like that name. It's right there, kind of co-favorite with the horse number 1. Race number 2 seems like a complete crapshoot, so we'll go with number 4, Arizona Brew to win. Race number 3. We're going to go at 2-3 Quinella with Warbridge and Deadly Black Eagle. And we're actually going to make the same bet in race number 4, Gold Diggin' Darlin' and Fat and Bitter. So a 2-3 Quinella in both race 3 and race 4. And then race 5, we're going with the triactor wheel. We're taking number 1, Wits Taquito, number 2, Ben Roy, and number 5, Be My Macho Man. We'll put those together and hopefully get a nice little run, maybe even sprinkle in race 6 and race 7 if we get some winners. But 2 more days of live racing after tonight, 7:30 it all gets going. Hoping to make it down there on Wednesday night for our final day of live racing. As I said, you can check out on the website, but $1 million payout on a single winner for the Jackpot 5-5, as well as a couple other mandatory payouts that certainly will send the amount of money wagered on the event through the roof, which is a great way to finish up the regular season of live racing out at Assiniboia Downs. Man, Remo, what an excellent show today. I mean, I love talking to Ted, still buzzing about the Banjo Bowl, just the entire atmosphere around this city over the course of the weekend. And then a full day of NFL capped off by tonight's Raiders-Ravens Monday Nighter. It's going to be great. And then, of course, hockey training camp just around the corner where we will have some actual legitimate live Jets news to talk about. And, of course, hear from some of the players and coaches they get ready to get on the ice.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. The season is such high expectations. They made the moves in the offseason. We'll get to see what they look like in uniform. I know there's a picture of Nate Schmidt wearing like Jets pants. Michael Russo posted. We were geeking out about that. So I'm excited. It's training camp. We'll have some hockey. We got a couple of weeks away from preseason games, but it's coming around the corner. And, you have that great time of year, Huss, where you have, football, NFL, baseball and hockey all together. Basketball, I think basketball starts a bit later this year, but I mean the first full day of NFL felt great, and it was so much fun to watch. I had to ask me the biggest surprise. I know you touched on it earlier. I mean, Aaron Rodgers not scoring a touchdown for me was the most. That was the most shocking that they didn't. I know not losing, and also Jameis throwing for 5 and like 150 yards. That was a bit of a surprise, that game.
Did you hear the interview with Jameis afterwards?
I did not.
Oh, folks, check it out. We can't play it because I think it'll be like the rights are reserved.
Oh yeah.
But he did a TV interview afterwards, and you got to see it for yourself. It is such vintage Jameis. Man, he's funny, but he was awesome yesterday. And I got to tell you, even without Michael Thomas, for them to go out and drop a 5 spot of touchdowns without even throwing for 200 yards, pretty amazing starting debut for Jameis Winston. And tell you what, I thought that this would be a tight game. I didn't really bet the game, but I certainly did not see the Saints humiliating the Packers the way they did. And I was, of course, focused, locked in on the Chiefs game and the Patriots and the Dolphins. But Remo, I look over and we're still early in the fourth quarter, and Jordan Love went into the game. That got everybody going in the bar going, what is happening to the Green Bay Packers? Jordan Love's in. Adams was out too. I guess at that point, LaFleur was just finished. We're screwed. We're not winning this game. May as well not get anybody hurt because that would be even worse than losing by an embarrassing 35-point spread.
Yeah. So I'm curious how it's going to work out in Green Bay. I know Aaron Rodgers, he wanted out, but they're like, no, you can't go. You're staying here. And they have Jordan Love. It might as well throw him in. So they're playing Detroit, and we'll see how that goes next week. You talk about Kyler Murray. I had a ticket on Kyler Murray to win MVP at like 40-1 before he got hurt, and he was on his way. It was him and Josh Allen. But I do like them. They got a great offense as well. So I mean, we'll see. We'll see what else. I guess Jacksonville losing to Houston. I know we talked with Haxa, who was saying Houston barely an NFL team, but some may argue Urban Meyer barely an NFL coach. I've seen a lot of speculation that he may not even last the season. And I know James Robinson fantasy owners, very upset with his usage after getting like 80% of the snaps last year.
I'll be honest. I am as into the NFL as anyone. I watched a total of 0 snaps of that game.
No, of course.
Did see a couple of highlights afterwards of the play, and hey, you know what? Good for the Texans to get a win. It was. We talked about how obscene it was that the Jacksonville Jaguars at 1-15 were a 3.5-point favorite on the road. But I think so many people thought the Texans were going to be bad. I still don't know if the Texans are going to win 4 games this season, but they got one. But not going to be as easy doing it against the Jacksonville Jags team. Even in their second matchup later on, I think when Trevor Lawrence has a little bit more experience under his belt. Yeah. What do you think about this Monday Nighter tonight?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's going to be a lot of scoring. I really don't have a lean either way. I know Baltimore has had issues with the running back position with everyone getting hurt. And we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins going down before the start of the season.
And Justice Hill. They're top 3 guys.
So, and they got Lat Murray, who was cut. Who they got? Taysom. They got another guy in there.
Tyson Williams. He's the rookie. Freeman. And I'm not sure if Devonta Freeman is going to be active or he's just on the practice roster right now, but he could be a guy going up soon. We'll talk a little waiver wire tomorrow for you on the program. Getting ready for your first big. The week 1 waiver wire is always huge in the fantasy football world. And so is the first Monday Nighter. I like the Raiders tonight. I know you guys are saying, what? Hustle's on the Raiders? You hate the Raiders. That's true. But I do like their spot as a home underdog in this game. Earlier it was 4.5, I think, when I bet it. I think we got it on the Circa contest at 4 from the lock shop. But right now it's 3.5. Still pretty good, and it's even money, plus 100 on Raiders at plus 3.5. If you do want to take it to plus 4.5, still a pretty good number at minus 118. That might be the way to go. Yeah. Great stuff. So, Rima, what were you going to say?
We used to get the double Monday Nighter, and we would have that secondary crew for the late game that always went like past midnight. Why did they stop doing that? Because they thought it was ridiculous to have a game go so late. with like
maybe
a
it was
B
because
crew.
because the B crew always just got murdered on social media about everybody watching the game. They decided they'd be better off just doing a normal game on Sunday. I'm with you though. With the game out in Vegas, I don't know why we didn't have a 6 o'clock game tonight and then a game starting at 9 and give us what the people want, an MNF doubleheader. But anyways, we'll do it. And by the way, we've got Thursday night football coming up 3 days from now. Week 2 begins. It's the Giants at the WFT. -3.5 for the Washington football team in that game. Big news from WFT is the fact that Ryan Fitzmagic in his first game knocked out, and now he's put on IR. He'll have to miss at least 3 weeks. It could be longer than that. So Taylor Heineke, who I thought performed pretty well in the playoffs last year, Reem, is going to get a chance to be the guy for the WFT beginning in week 2 in a big divisional game against the Giants. Both of those teams looking for their first win in the season.
Yeah, well, they bring in someone. I saw Robert Griffin III posting on Twitter, make the call, and then posting a highlight of a touchdown run. You know, Cam Newton's available, who used to coach Cam Newton in Carolina, Ron Rivera, and who's currently the coach of Washington football team. Do they give Cam a call? So we'll wait and see what happens. I had Antonio Gibson in fantasy. He had a solid day. Wasn't spectacular, wasn't terrible. Terry McLaurin, I mean, he's a very good receiver as well. So I mean, we'll see. Not like Fitzpatrick was looking that great. You know what kind of quarterback he is, but we'll see if they bring someone else in.
You know, speaking of fantasy guys that had dud week 1s, I mean, we knew Zeke was going to be in tough, against that Bucs defense. But I was stunned at Derrick Henry's lack of production, Reem. And at one point, he had 6 carries for 6 yards. They had a first down on the goal line, gave it to Derrick Henry. Like, they weren't Sean McGuiring him. He was getting the ball, but unable to get that yard, and ended up being Tannehill that ran it in. So, I mean, Chandler Jones, by the way, had 5 sacks.
Yeah.
5 sacks in one game. I mean, that performance by the Cardinals was amazing, to be honest. And they're going to need to be that good to hang with the likes of the Seahawks, the Rams, and the 49ers out in the NFC West. All right, folks. Well, we'll have another big show tomorrow. We'll wrap the Monday Nighter, look ahead to everything else going on this week, both the CFL, latest from the National Hockey League as players return to their cities, getting ready for training camp, and, of course, the Bombers getting back to practice in advance of their game against the Edmonton Elks. Big thank to Ted Wyman, as well as Brad Gagnon on Bleacher Report. Everyone in the chat, if you haven't already, by the way, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up. I know we've got over 150 people still in here right now, 91 likes. So if you could hit the thumbs up before you leave, much appreciated. And speaking of appreciation, thanks to Donnie and the gang over at Manitoba Battery, Not Autocorp, Royal Sports, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Little Brown Jug Brewing, Boston Pizza, Canadian Club, Assiniboia Downs, and Coolbet Canada for making WST happen every day. Folks, enjoy the Monday Nighter tonight. We'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock live on YouTube and a little later on in the afternoon in your podcast feed here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Have a great night.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.